Elliot. That's Kessa. This is the Bible Study Experience. What episode is this? 5? I think it's number 5. We're still here.
Whether you like it or not.
Alright, we're going to start ignoring you. So we're going to take a look at the Bible says about worship. So, what is your favorite way to worship God?
I don't know. I don't think I've ever thought about it before.
We talk about the way that churches normally consider worship, i.e. music. I think hymns would be my preference. But then there's also the idea that every part of your life is worship.
Yeah, and then you're like... Because the ones that popped into my head at first, a list.
Mm-hmm.
It was music, art, service. They're just your life in general.
Yeah. It's what's your favorite part of life? That's...
Yeah.
Makes it an unfair question that way.
Yeah. So I don't know. Is it okay to have a favorite?
I think so. Might be. Yeah. I don't know if my favorite way to worship God is playing with kids.
Whereas I do love that.
Yeah. You can have your favorites.
So maybe I'll have an answer for you by the end.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this. And
then... Alright, so the first idea we have here is humans are created to worship.
Whoop, whoop.
Let's take a look at Genesis 1:26 and 27. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea, and the birds in the sky, over the livestock, and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground.' So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." So us being made for worship here is kind of implied in our being like God, I guess. So we worship what we perceive to be perfect or beautiful.
Okay, I was about to say it doesn't mention worship in here at all. So where are you getting that?
Probably could have done a little bit better. But I think here, so since we're made in the image of God, we're kind of like an imperfect mirror to who God is. And in that sense, we worship God because he is the perfection of the goodness that is in us.
Okay. So how are you defining worship here? Is that just showing God how we appreciate him?
I'm just trying to set the foundation that humans, we are our position in relation to God when it comes to giving respect and honor.
Okay.
So because of our being made in the image of God, we are created to honor him.
Okay.
So if anyone or anything deserves worship, it's God. But that's often attributed to something or someone else. When we perceive something or someone to be perfect or beautiful. Right? Which is the idea that if you're not worshiping God, you are worshiping something.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Okay.
So we can make a comparison here of two examples of worshiping God that are so vastly different that it makes you wonder, what even the idea of worshiping God is. You want to go ahead and read the verse about Job?
Okay. Job 1:20 through 22. At this, Job got up and tore his robe and shaved his head. Then he fell to the ground in worship and said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing.
So worship in that scenario is falling on the ground and defining his position in relation to God. He said, "So naked I came from my mother's womb." That is how he came into the world. And naked I will depart. Nothing is going with him. So that's his position in relation to God. And it's saying that that's worship. It's interesting. So worship is a form of accepting or proclaiming our relation to God, you think?
I thought you were going to explain more. And you just asked me a question that I was not prepared for.
Yeah.
That's where you keep
Keep talking. So it says that Job fell to the ground and worshipped, right? And I think the following verse, verse 21, is the actual act of worshiping that is being described in verse 20, right? So when he speaks, his falling to the ground and his speaking here is what is worship. Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. So that's three phrases. The first phrase is his position to his mother and to life and death, which belongs to God. So those things are not up to him. And then the second claim is the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. So all of his coming into the world and his leaving the world, that is up to God. And in light of the fact that he has lost so much in the preceding verses that we didn't read, it is profound for him to actually say that. And then the third claim, may the name of the Lord be praised. He is putting himself in the position of saying, despite all the things that I feel, I know my relation to God, and this is who I am meant to be, which is a creature that praises God.
Okay.
So
let's look at the next one.
Okay. Do you want to read that?
Yeah. That's Samuel.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 Samuel 6:14 through 15. Wearing a linen ephod. David was dancing before the Lord with all his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets.
Yep. So I didn't really put a lot of context there.
Well, this is more of like what we would think about like now. It's more like artistic. There's dancing, there's singing, they're shouting. It's not like
David went Pentecostal.
Yeah.
Kind of lost his clothes for a bit.
Both of these, they're talking about not having clothes. So is that just how we worship the Lord?
Should our worship music talk more about nakedness?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But
but yeah, no. In that example, David is dancing. So worship has a sense of mourning or a sense of excitement, and in either case, it is about how you feel in relation to God. But your feelings are subjugated to how you are supposed to be, are subjugated to who you are supposed to be in relation to God. So David's excitement in dancing is coming out, and it is for the Lord. And it is to proclaim that the glory of God rather than his own glory. And then in the example with Job, he is expressing his feelings in a profound way, but at the same time it's in relation to his relationship with God. So his feelings are subject to his understanding of his relationship with God.
Okay, so worship here,
Mm-hmm.
slash in Job, is posturing yourself in relation to God
Yeah.
and letting that be known to God, to yourself, to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like how in prayer you're posturing yourself to the will of God
Yeah.
rather than your own.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But it's also there's also like a I lost my thought. But it's in those two examples, there's a lot of emotion, but it's also a reflection of reality. When Job is mourning, it is because he needs to be mourning. That's the reality that he's in. And when David is dancing, it's because the ark is coming back to the city. Yeah.
So it's almost sounding like worship is a result of life.
Yeah.
Like you how to explain what I'm saying? Like something happened and then they had to kind of like when you pray to help yourself figure out
I think I'm
how you're okay, so you pray in order to figure out what's going on, like what the will of God is. Like you pray, I mean there's other reasons for prayer, but
the prayer is before and the worship is after.
Yeah.
In that idea.
Yeah, so here something happens in their life and then in order to comprehend it, they choose to worship. So it's like a result. I kind of lost my train of thought there. But do you get what I'm getting at?
Yeah, so so what you're saying, I think I agree for the most part, but I also disagree in a sense.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing
help me figure out what I'm saying.
what you're saying is that prayer is you trusting in God's will before your confident expectation in God's action, and then worship is you saying, regardless of what has happened, I am still in relationship with you.
Yeah, but because you want to worship no matter what.
Right.
Like Job was worshiping even though he just lost everything, and David's worshiping because
the ark.
Something good's happening.
Yeah.
For the Lord.
Yeah. The one part that I push back there is that I wonder if there's a sense in which I know I've seen people who will pray and then worship. Like even just on a regular Sunday, you pray and then you worship, and then maybe at the end of service you have prayer and worship again.
So is prayer worship?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Is prayer worship and is worship a type of prayer? Because I think they can both be one or the other. I think there's worship songs or hymns that have prayers in them, or echo the Psalms that were actually meant to be prayers, and then there's also prayers that are songs.
Okay, so then I guess we just get back to worship is realizing your relationship to God,
which is also what prayer is.
Yeah.
So they're kind of the same thing, but they take different means. Or is prayer more? But
prayer
not,
usually is talking.
Yeah.
To God. And worship, it seems like it has a couple more aspects to it. There's some sort of physical something.
Okay.
And there's usually praise be to the Lord involved in all this.
All right. Here's there's another verse that says somewhere in the New Testament, pray without ceasing.
Yeah.
And that is a command that the Orthodox Church takes very seriously, where some people actually attempt to do a short prayer thousands of times a day, and it's a way of getting closer to God, works, kind of. But the idea is to incorporate prayer into your soul such that your very being is praying constantly. So that understanding of prayer then is that prayer is a position of the Spirit that you need to constantly act out in order to transform your spirit into one that is always in a position of prayer, recognizing the position of God and always leaning on God. So then if we accept that version of prayer as what prayer actually, of like what the meaning of the verse pray without ceasing actually means, then worship is just another way of actually doing that same thing. Affirming.
It encompasses more types of things?
It does make it sound like they're both very similar, serve very similar purposes.
Yeah, because like music, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If music can be a prayer,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also worship, and that's good.
Yeah, and a lot of psalms, I think, like start out as a prayer and then end as worship.
Yeah.
And they're and some of them are meant to be like more chanted or sung. Even the prayer part. It's rather confusing.
So is it more of just how you're trying to posture your heart?
Yeah, I think in both.
What your intention is.
I think maybe in all things. What is that verse? In everything you do, do for the glory of God. Is that how it goes? Should we look it up?
Yeah.
1 Corinthians 10:31. Pull it up here. It says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it for the glory of God. I think that specific verse is talking about like food dedicated to idols, but it's the same idea as the one I was actually thinking of, which is for talking about work. So whether you pray or worship or preach a sermon or talk to your friends or clean a house or do your job or deal with crying babies, do it for the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
Put yourself in the position of relying on God and honoring who God is in relation to you. Or living your life how you should in relation to God in all things. And prayer and worship are intentional ways of doing that.
Mm-hmm. So if we think about Jesus, how would you say he worshipped? Because he usually says when he's praying,
Yeah.
like they either do it as a group or he goes off by himself, or when he's like teaching them how to pray.
Yeah. He did fast.
Mm-hmm.
And he did pray a lot. I don't know did Jesus ever sing in the New Testament? I don't remember.
He did go to synagogue as a child.
Yeah.
I don't know if he can. I can't recall if he continued.
That probably means he made sacrifices.
Yeah. So he probably sang if they did.
Maybe. And then attending service and hearing people talk about God, that I think could be a form of worship, depending on the position of your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then also Jesus, his studying of the Old Testament, and doing that would be a form of worship. But what's interesting is, since Jesus is God, all of that was already like basically written on his heart before he ever read the Torah. It was already in there because he was perfect. So his relationship with God was already perfect before, like regardless of any act of worship that he could have done, he was already in a perfect relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, every moment of his life was perfect worship.
Okay, because I was about to say we were talking about like how to worship God through your work, like how to let it glorify him.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're talking about worship like that, then all of Jesus's ministry was worship, was bringing glory back to God.
Yeah.
So could we go as far to say that Jesus' whole life on earth was worship? Could we go that far? Could we say that? No, I won't go that far.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we could, but I don't think it would be accurate to the reality of how people actually understand worship. That might be closer to just living a Christian life than worship. And worship might be similar to what it means to live a Christian life, but is rather subject to it rather than. I don't think worship is like the big box that we put prayer and being a Christian in. I think it might be that being a Christian has prayer and worship inside of it, but worship is pretty much like encompasses a lot of the things.
Just trying to figure out where the bubbles go. Kind of like one of those Venn diagrams. We have the 3 circles.
Mm-hmm.
We overlap. Trying to figure out where.
So if God's not at the center, it's not worship. I think that would be fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
If it's not leading back to God, then it's not worship. So in that sense, maybe a lot of modern Christian songs aren't necessarily worship. It's all about your feelings about God.
Mm-hmm.
So it's you and then God, rather than God then you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at the rest of your notes
Mhm.
and see if we can muddle this out a bit more.
So here's a question. Based off what we're talking about right now, do you think that the entire church service would be considered worship, or just the worship music would be worship?
I feel like it depends on perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, the pastor, is his sermon like his way of worshiping God?
Yeah.
And then you wouldn't be the one worshiping, you would be witnessing someone else worship.
Mm.
So then would you need to posture yourself in prayer? Like, Lord, let me hear these words and get, like, I don't know where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, does it depend on,
Well, when I've
like, how do you worship yourself when
Yeah.
you're listening to someone else preach?
when I preach or do any sort of speaking about Bible, I pray that the words that God will speak through me,
Mm-hmm.
and that my words will bring glory to Him. So that's putting myself in the right position to God, and the hope there is that as God is speaking through me, everything that I've studied is being formatted according to God's will, such that my knowledge that I had going into the sermon may actually be being improved by God in the process of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm receiving from God at the same time as everyone else in that sense.
So I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah.
kind of leaning more towards no right now because
Yeah.
I can see like prayer and then like the music part and like maybe the service part being
Mhm.
worship, but like for example, Jesus, when they're at Mary and Martha's house and they're all sitting at his feet,
Mm-hmm.
like listening, I don't think they're necessarily worshiping at that time,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
they did, you know.
Yeah, it might not necessarily be worshiping because it's not framing their lives in relation to God.
Mm-hmm.
Although a pastor can help someone frame their life in position to God, in relation to God.
Yeah.
Um,
And you're not, it's hard when it's, because like the sermon part, you're listening to a human
mhm.
giving the sermon.
Well, you're also
So it would
listening
be
to
hard to,
band.
I'm
Sorry.
just talking about the sermon.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because you asked me about the whole service.
Yeah.
Okay. So just the sermon, since you're listening to a human give the sermon, it would be kind of hard to like worship God if something else is like, right?
Holding your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, but I would say that like worship bands is kind of like the same issue.
Okay.
I don't really think that the whole church service would be called a worship service either. Put your opinion in the comments, and while you're at it, like and subscribe. That would be useful. for us. Spiritual worship versus literal worship. I don't know what I'm talking about. That's Romans 12:1. You want to read that?
Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship.
Yeah. So is that spiritual worship, or is there a difference between spiritual worship and literal worship? Like the literal act of worshiping? Or is that more about like your spiritual being, like living a life as a Christian?
Well, we were talking about how worship is posturing yourself in relationship to God.
So that's like
So can you
spiritual.
separate the two?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. So, therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. In the Old Testament, making a sacrifice was a form of worship, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then, if you're offering your body as a living sacrifice, then every aspect of your life is worship. As long as you are doing it properly.
Okay, so that's where we get the idea of you can worship God even through your work.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm just confused. Are we going to get to an answer here at some point? You're just confusing me.
I'm reading the Bible, and put it together. I don't know. And we have like one verse left. We don't have a conclusion. Worship's obviously important.
Alright, let's just read the next two verses.
There's one.
One more verse. Hebrews 13:15. Through Jesus, therefore, let us continually offer to God a sacrifice of praise, the fruit of lips that openly profess his name.
So worship is the realization of who God is, like what we've been saying before. But based off that verse, it's specifically the fruit of lips that openly